2 days after the former Yorkshire cricketer, Azeem Rafiq, told a parliamentary committee that the sport was institutionally racist, he's apologised after it emerged that he'd sent anti-Semitic messages. Rafiq says that the comments are from 2011, when he was 19 years of age, and he was ashamed of what he'd written. Rafiq's comments have led to Yorkshire County Cricket Club possibly missing out on millions of pounds. Anyway, I could go on, but let's not, because I think many of you have followed this story. It's been a huge kind of storm, hasn't it? Lots of people have come into the firing line. There's been a huge select committee investigating into it as well. And yeah, like to quote an old saying, Samantha, heads have rolled because of this. So I found that this twist today quite interesting. It doesn't, of course, detract from any of Rafiq's experiences, but it does make me look a little bit personally at the kind of witch hunt mentality that we've got and where we go with this. I wonder your thoughts.
Well, I don't think it's a witch hunt mentality as such, in the sense that what we've seen is one set of comments, so far as I've seen, from Azeem Rafiq. At a very specified time, he's given the date, his age. That doesn't take away from the offensive nature of those comments. I think that is quite different from what we're comparing it to in terms of what happened at Yorkshire Cricket Club, in terms of the institution's response to repeated incidents. So I think that's a very different thing from a comment made by a 19-year-old off the cuff, as opposed to comments that were made to him by those in positions of responsibility and authority. So I don't think you're comparing like for like. I don't think that it takes anything away from the evidence that's been given to the Select Committee in terms of what was happening at Yorkshire Cricket Club, in terms of the frequency of it, in terms of the apparent lack of accountability in terms of among senior management. However, the only salient point I think that arises from this is that we all have to often, I think, internally look at our behaviour, our language, and no one is completely free from prejudice, because we live in a world, and I know some people took exception to the mention of structural racism and structural systems. We live in a world that has been structured in a specific way, which impacts all people, and so none of us is immune from any form of prejudice.
Yeah, Jake, I mean, I'm going to cut to the chase with this, because I've watched this story unfold, and I think actually we discussed it, the Yorkshire Cricket thing, a couple of weeks ago or something. And there's no denying Yorkshire Cricket Club, of course, you know, they should have acted in a much better and took away all the rest of it. So I'm not trying to take away from any of that, but I can't help but notice the minute that there seems to be allegations, there is an immediate rush. And this is what I mean by witch hunt. So before we even got all the facts on the table of what had gone on and what hadn't gone on, and we didn't even have the report last time we spoke, and regardless of that, people were piling in, rushing to pile in, sponsors were pulling out, the immediate kind of sense that someone might have done wrong before it was even proven at that point that that was indeed the case. And it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, because it's almost like, in all other areas of life, it's almost like you're innocent and proven guilty. But when I think it comes to this topic of racism, the second that there's an allegation against somebody, before it's been proven often, there's this whole mass exodus of sponsors and all the rest of it. And then my point is, like we're just describing there, things can turn on a sixpence. And it makes me uncomfortable, the way that well, it's a witch hunt. I'm repeating myself. It's just a witch hunt. And Jake, I wonder your view on this.
Well, you're right. I mean, we did talk about this story last time, and at that time we didn't know all the evidence that had come. The report hadn't been unveiled, so
But the sponsors was out by then.
And the sponsors had pulled out. That's right. But it's interesting that at that time Samantha didn't afford any benefit of the doubt to the people who were accused then. I seem to recall you saying that it was undeniably racist and structurally racist, and they were guilty. In the way that now you're making excuses for Rafiq.
I don't think
I mean, the point that I would make is the same as I made last time, which is that we need to look at the motivation behind the comments and the tweets and the behaviour. In Rafiq's case, it could very well be that they were comments that he made off the cuff when he was 19 years old and he was being stupid and it was banter that went too far and he didn't mean it and it wasn't indicative of any sort of hate that he had in his heart, and I would accept that.
It doesn't make them
but
acceptable.
It could mean, but it doesn't make it acceptable. Or it could mean that it could be indicative of a pattern of anti-Semitic bullying that took place against a Jewish player that was in the dressing room. And the two things are very different, and we just don't know which of the two it is. And I think that we've seen a lot more evidence in the report as to the sort of racism that Rafiq faced, which, according to his testimony, was absolutely appalling. It was much worse than banter. Initially, when we first came here, it seemed like they were talking about it being a bit of banter, but it wasn't. And forcing him to drink wine when he was Muslim and all the rest of it was horrendous. So we need to find out whether this was as bad or whether it was just a bit of sort of mindless banter when he was 19 years old. And I think the motivation is really what counts.
See, what I'm finding interesting here, because I actually think that what you're saying is quite sensible, but I'm getting head shakes and disapproving sounds from both of you.
Can I explain why?
I'm the Jewish one.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say,
but what we were talking about last week or last time was, sorry, I'm...
No, it's perfectly fine. Because I can follow up then.
OK. Yeah,
perfectly fine, don't worry.
OK, was a very specific word used in a very specific context, and I was clear then, as I am now, that it is not acceptable and not banter. I've not made any excuses for Azeem Rafiq
But you did just say that straight away. Your point to me in return was, well, hang on, it's one message, or Andy was 19. So you didn't
say
mean
that about the other guys who were accused.
But one message, but sorry, you're not comparing like for like. I just find it beggars belief that you're trying to make it appear that these are like situations. The first instance that we were talking about, when we arrived, when we spoke about this a few weeks ago and before the report was issued, we were already aware that there were at least 43 incidents that he raised. Seven of which had been proven at the stage of the report. And then we heard in the evidence before the Select Committee the real nature of what he went through during his time at Yorkshire. It's not unusual when there is an employment dispute, which in fact has happened in this case, vis-à-vis Azeem Rafiq and Yorkshire Cricket Club, that people go around digging and think, well, if you've made this complaint about us, let's see what we can find about you. And I'm sorry, what have they come up with so far? Just one series of messages.
Have you seen them?
How do you know what else there is?
Well, let's wait and see if there is more.
Let's wait and see if there is more. Let's not excuse him before we find out.
But we've not excused him.
And the important thing is that we don't leap to conclusions and say that either he was 19 years old, it was a long time ago, and it doesn't matter, or that he's an anti-Semitic evil person.
And we also should not leap to conclusions.
We have to wait and see. We have to wait and see what the reality is. But it's interesting that he is making the same appeals as his alleged attackers made, saying, oh, it was a long time ago, I was 19, I was stupid, I didn't mean it. That's exactly what the people who are accused of being racist towards him, that's the argument that they make
I
as
actually
well.
would support in that way. I'm also very, very hesitant, let's say at least, to just excuse banter, because if you talk about the motivation...
Banter is where racism happens.
That is the thing. I think if you talk about structural racism and anti-Semitism and any structural discrimination, that is actually apparent in banter. Because why would you think in the first place to... I mean, it would never occur to a lot of people, let's say, I hope never to me, to say... Even in jest, anything anti-Semitic and racist, why would you?
I accept your point.
You really need to start there and take it very...
And why jump to the conclusion, that it was banter in the first place? When Azeem Rafiq raised these issues, he was very clear about how frequent it was, that it was repeated.
Are you talking about the banter against him or the banter that he delivered?
Sorry, I'm not using the word banter, so don't try and put that word in my mouth.
The words that he received or the words that he delivered?
Racist language is never banter.
Yeah.
Racist language is never banter.
Yes, I agree with that.
In any circumstance.
I have a bit different perspective. I think it's about the context and about the motivation. And I'm saying this as somebody who, you know, is Jewish, and I've received anti-Semitism a lot in the past, particularly when I was a kid, and visibly Jewish growing up.
Which is awful. It shouldn't happen.
And I'm not standing on the side of anti-Semitism. All I'm saying is that I think that if you look at the world that we're creating, it's a world in which certain words or whatever or certain phrases are so taboo the list of taboo words and phrases and thoughts and ideas is becoming longer and longer and longer, that people stray into them inadvertently and then get cancelled and pilloried and
agree with you to that
ejected from
part.
society.
I agree.
And so what I'm
with
arguing
you
against is this sort of hypersensitive, offence-taking culture, which
Yeah,
I think
I
doesn't do
argue
anybody.
against that,
I
but
agree
don't
with you.
say that word that was used, sorry, is acceptable. That word is
But
not
he hasn't said
acceptable.
that.
No, I agree with you to that degree that I'm not sure that it's really helped if we come down like a ton of bricks on a 19-year-old. But what we really need to change is the culture behind it. And we need to change racist thinking, we need to change anti-Semitic thinking. And that starts at schools, very much at universities. And that really goes down to the
I agree with you, but I think
the motivation.
But I think that what we can't do is...
also need to pick up, of course, on...
That's right, but I think we can't exchange a culture that has unacknowledged racism coursing through it for a culture in which, even when you're not being racist, you're still getting cancelled. You know, we've got to find a happy medium whereby a bit of common sense is applied.
If you use anti-racist words, how are you not racist?
No, I'm not defending. I'm not defending racism. All I'm talking about is finding. It might sound that to you, but it doesn't sound that to me.
Well,
is finding a common sense
I want to
balance
just
in the
pull
middle.
you up there, Samantha. How can he? Because I've read, you're Jewish. These messages are anti-Semitic, so they're essentially against you, your belief system, I guess, and you...
Identity.
Yeah, your identity. Thank you. He's not defending that, and you're suggesting he is.
No, I'm saying, Jake is saying that we should not exchange a culture which might have, the point I want to pick up on, unacknowledged racism coursing through it, for one in which we have certain words which are banned. I don't think that's quite the...
It wasn't quite what I said.
Well, OK, or where language is policed.
I meant for one in which there's a witch hunt mentality, where even innocent people inadvertently stray
I can agree with.
stray into this and get cancelled.
No, that I can agree with, but I don't agree with not accepting that certain types of words, certain words and certain language are not acceptable. In my view... about to say in my submission, in my view, there are certain words that are just not acceptable.
Well, I think it's about context. I think it's about
I don't think so. I don't think there is ever any context where certain words are acceptable.
At all?
No.
Ever? Because I know that what I will get, and I know because I do this topic, when you say that there's no context ever that certain words cannot be used, people will come in, if they haven't already, because I don't read all the messages as they straight away, and come in and say, well, hang on a second, because a white person can't say a certain word, but then a black person in a rap song can say a certain word. So you're telling me that there's no context ever that you're allowed to say certain words, but there must be, because I've just given you an example.
But yeah, you've given me an example of how it is used. You've not asked me what I think about the use of that word in the context of the example that you're giving. So I don't... The N-word...
So what do you think
So
then?
the N-word, which I think is what you were referring to, used in rap music, I don't find acceptable. I don't find it acceptable, regardless of who is using it. So that's my position, and I'm consistent.
Yeah, good. OK, interesting, because I know that often we do kind of have that sentiment. But anyway, I guess the point that I was trying to make, and Jake, I think you made it far more succinctly than what I did, is the witch hunt. It's almost like the second there's an allegation, everyone, I saw it, we mentioned it when we were doing this topic last time, sponsors rushing to distance themselves, which is fair enough, who would want to be associated with racism, but it wasn't even proven at that point. Anyway.
There's also no room for apology and redemption, I think, sometimes as well, and mistakes. Mistakes being rectified.
Samantha, what was you about to say?
So I was just going to say, they were proven. We just hadn't had the public sharing of the report. They were proven at the point we were having the discussion. And what we've had this week is effectively the public airing of what was in the report that we hadn't seen. And I think there's not a single person who was not shocked by that. And I thought it was really interesting because, for example, Oliver Dowden, who was present and listened, was one of the people who was visibly shocked by what was going on at Yorkshire Cricket Club and the type of racism that Azeem Rafiq was subjected to. And I thought it's interesting because Oliver Dowden has been quite vocal about speaking out against cancel culture, speaking out about, for example, not trying to have a sort of revisionist history, rewriting our history as a nation. And I think that sometimes people take certain positions without necessarily having an understanding of suffering. And that is the word. I think that is the only appropriate word. The suffering that certain people have gone through that has led to the depth and strength of feeling with which they respond and talk about these things and the strength of feeling that has given rise to cancel culture. So I'm not saying that cancel culture is right, but I think that when we have so many people weighing in and talking about why it is wrong, those voices or those people are often, in my view, not sitting down, not taking a step back and trying to listen to where some of the hurt has come from.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.